You're listening to Running the Goat's Books and Broadsides new interview series. My name is Michelle Porter, and I'm the social media storyteller with Running the Goat. As part of my work, I've been recording so many interviews with amazing authors and illustrators that Marnie Parsons and I thought it would be a great idea to share some of these conversations with you. So we're doing that now. Most of these early interviews were recorded without the idea that anyone would listen to them in their entirety. The editing won't always fit your typical question and answer format, but they'll be fun to listen to. And this way you'll get to hear some of the stories behind the books we publish at Running the Goat. We're starting with Bob Bartel, author of Nutaui's Cap, which was published early this year. He was born and raised in a little town called Waldheim in Saskatchewan, which is about 30 miles north of Saskatoon, where he's living now, to be close to his grandchildren. In the 1980s, Bob Bartel and his family moved to Labrador to work with the Innu communities there. It was during that time that Bob and his family supported and became involved in the protest against NATO's low-flying jets. I'll let Bob tell the rest of the story.
Yes, I was there for most of the protests. They started, I believe, in 1987 and went to 89. This story stuck with me for 30 years. My name is Bob Bartel. I'm retired. I used to be a insurance broker. Before that, I was working with MCC for 2 stints. I also have an education background. From 1986 to 1989, my family went to Labrador, to Goose Bay, and we were under the auspices of Mennonite Central Committee, who had some volunteers working in Labrador. Dorothy and I were asked to be the coordinators of that program, and one of the things that we were asked to do was also support the Innu in their struggles. So they had been protesting the low-level flights through regular channels, and then later on through protests by walking on the runways. And this is one of the stories that was told to me by one of the protesters as I went to the protest camp in the evening. When I finally retired, then I decided to write this story down. I think it's an important story for several reasons. Number one, it shows the strength of a people. It shows the strength of the Innu and their struggle. It shows the power of nonviolent protests. And I think this is a very important thing to be learning as we work on climate change and the protests that will be required to get something done. The Innu they went out as whole families. There was babies in arms, there was elders with canes, and they walked on the runway. Whenever the Innu wanted to go on the runway, they did. No one could stop them. And that's the kind of thing that will be required to deal with climate change. I was not allowed to go by the Innu onto the runway because they said if you put a white man on there, then that's the first person the media will gravitate to. So the only white person that they allowed on the runway was Father James Roche. What I did was I photographed the protests, and I did some media, and also I worked with the. We went on tour and did some of the media. So I did slideshows and stuff for them. Mennonites, they have a peace theology, along with the Quakers and the Doukhobors and some other churches were considered to be some of the peace churches, and we have a peace theology. So that fits well with standing up against the military. It also is important with with justice issues. So the Mennonite Central Committee is an organization that's started during the Russian Revolution. We sent food there, and eventually we've developed programs in development and as well as in justice. Well, I did spend 3 years in association with them and defending their people and learning about it. I attended a protest hunt, and I spent time. I went to Stephenville to visit people in jail. So during this process, I met many people. You know, I met Marie Wadden, who did a story about the protests, or a book about the protests. I met Nigel Markham, who did a movie, Hunters and Bombers, from National Film Board. I met Camille Fouillard. So what I did, after I started the story, I did a 300-word story about it. And then what I wanted to do was check with Camille, because I knew her from protest days. And I said, you know, what do you think of this story? And unbeknownst to me, she was head of the Innu curriculum. She had continued working with the Innu for a long time. And then what happened was that Elena Andrew, the girl who is Nanass in the story, was also working for the school in Sheshatshiu. And so Camille then tested the story with people in the community. She tested the story with Elena. And so then between Elena and Camille and the other people's advice, they made suggestions to me, and the story then went from 300 words to 1145, I think it is. Some publishers want to keep it under 1,000 words, but Marnie and Running the Gold Press were quite willing to make this book expand. And so Camille wrote the background, Camille got the publisher, Camille got the high quality illustrator in Marianne Panashawi. Camille got the translators. So all of those coordination was done by Camille, and so her vision was to use these books in the schools, because this was the only book written for children that was about this period of time. It took on a different vision as Camille became involved.
What do you think is important for people to know about this book and this story?
Well, the thing is that this story is 30 years old. And I don't know how old you are, but I don't know how much you remember. You lived in Newfoundland, how much this story permeated press, CBC across Canada.
Yeah.
And yet, if I go check with people who are under 30 years old, they have no knowledge of it. Those that are older than 30 years old have forgotten about it. And so it is important for people to realize the impact of colonialism on our Canadian Aboriginal people. I mean, this is just, it's the root of much of the evil that has been placed upon Aboriginal people. And so it's true that way. I think in an interview, Elena Andrew said she wants children to know that the Innu are strong and brave. I think I want people to realize that some of these protests are still going on. They're still going on in the West by Aboriginal people who are in a similar position as the Innu were. They have no treaty out west, and people are putting pipelines through their land. And the elders, the traditional elders, are opposed. We heard that again today on the news. And then, as I said before, there is the whole climate change that we also have to rally around, and we will need to use protests like Greta Thunberg. We are at a vulnerable part of the Earth's existence, and we need to rally around and learn from our past, and learn from the people who are keepers of the earth. I mean, as we continue to mine in Voisey's Bay, we're damaging the earth. Whereas we're putting dams at Labrador Falls, we're creating problems with fish being contaminated with mercury. And now people were worried about that and protested at Muskrat Falls. So we have to, or my culture has to learn to listen to the people who are keepers of the earth.